For the purposes of this story, this is Qatar Force One. I'm not sure this was the best way of telling this story. You might remember a story from a few weeks ago that Donald Trump unexpectedly switched planes on the way back from his trip to Turkey for the NATO summit. We're only just now learning that that story was a lot weirder than we thought it was. Now, this gets complicated, and people always tell me that when you're trying to explain a complicated story, you should use visual aids. So, for the purposes of this story, this is Qatar Force One, the Boeing 747 that was gifted to Donald Trump by the government of Qatar a few months ago. Donald Trump's decided to use it as Air Force One, pretty much because the seats are nicer. The story was that Trump flew out on this plane to Ankara and was expected to fly back on it too. This surprised a lot of people, because a lot of people thought that Trump would reserve the Qatar jet for domestic flights because it doesn't have some of the same safety features as this. This is exactly what it looks like. This is the old Air Force One, the baby blue 747s. These have been around for a million years and they're getting a bit old and tatty, which is why Trump prefers flying around in this one. Now, it's taken Boeing nearly a decade to build the fleet of replacements for this slightly old Air Force One. And this one, the armed forces managed to get ready in 8 months. So, some people started looking into whether this one lacks some of the same features as this one, specifically safety features. Listen, while I've got you, if you're enjoying the video, do me a favour, hit the like and subscribe buttons. Now, I don't know about you, right now I'm finding it really hard with the social algorithms burying a lot of the content that I want to see on the internet. We want to make sure all the important stuff gets to you. So we've just launched Mirror Plus. You get reduced ads, exclusive features and analysis from me and a bunch of the other brilliant journalists at the Mirror. Plus, drumroll please, you can sign up for my new email newsletter, the US Dispatch. So I can send gossip and stories that you won't find anywhere else, straight to your inbox once a week. And all for a fraction of the cost of this coffee. There'll be some jokes as well, and you'll find the link in the description. Anyway, where were we? When the president flies, he normally takes 2 planes, pretty much always. There's several reasons for this, not least of which is in case something bad happens to the plane he's flying on, so they have a spare. Last day of the conference, Donald Trump says on Truth Social that he's not flying home in this plane after all. He's actually flying home in this plane for old time's sake.
And we'll be going home by normal methods.
He's sending this plane over Europe ahead of time to land at RAF Middenhall so the US Air Force personnel who work at this airbase in Suffolk, which is run by the US Air Force, can have a look at the new plane. A lot of people saw it as confirmation of what they always thought, which is this one was missing key features designed to keep the president safe on overseas trips. Sure enough, a few days later, the New York Times comes out with this big story confirming that this plane lacks several of the security features of this plane. And the switcheroo in Ankara, where Trump didn't go on this plane, but did go on this plane, was at the urging of the Secret Service, who had become concerned about some credible warnings that there could be an attempt by Iran to assassinate the president on this journey. And this story appeared to be confirmed when this plane was taken out of service a few days later and sent away for improvements. But it didn't explain everything. It didn't explain, for instance, why, when the press boarded this jet in Ankara, they were told to put the blinds down on the windows and leave them down until after takeoff. Anyway, now the Washington Post has come out with this jaw-dropping scoop reporting that Trump wasn't on this plane either. Donald Trump's security team decided that even this more heavily guarded plane wasn't safe enough for the president to fly home on. So, under cover of darkness, in a Hollywood-style operation, Donald Trump left Air Force One in a catering truck. He hopped out a door on the bottom of the plane into a catering truck, and the catering truck took him to a third plane. Look, I ran out of aeroplanes. I need you to focus up. This is a US Air Force C-32A. It's a smaller aeroplane than the big 747 Air Force One. And on the day of the flight, it was using the call sign Reach 18, but it had the usual tracking system switched off. So, with Qatar Force One already in the air, and everyone thinking Donald Trump was in this plane, when in fact, He was here. They all flew to RAF Middenhall in Suffolk and recombobulated for the trip across the Atlantic. Trump's secret plane arrived about 25 minutes before the decoy, and apparently no one noticed him making the switch. So here's a question that hasn't really been covered. If the plan was to use a decoy all along, why not use this plane? Why did this plane even have to be involved? According to the New York Times, one of the differences between this plane and this plane is that this one does not have that door on the bottom that we were talking to earlier, which allowed Trump to get on to a catering truck under cover of darkness. The extra fun thing about him being trundled off in a van is that people have started calling it the Eras Tour manoeuvre. Real ones know. If they hadn't used this old fella, the whole caper would have been a lot more difficult. So now we're all caught up and have got over the fact that I'm using toys to tell this story. Why does any of it matter? Well, first of all, it means the Trump administration has been lying for weeks about where Trump was on that day and how he travelled from Turkey to the United States. That doesn't seem like a particularly big deal to us because the British government is, and has been for quite a while, quite opaque about the movements and locations of ministers. They are very reticent to confirm the movements of ministers, even quite often after they've moved and once they're in a completely different place. Some of this is for legitimate security reasons, I get that. Some of it is just for the minister's convenience. But in the States, on the other hand, it's extremely rare for the American people not to know where the president is at any given time. The last time I can think of when the president was moved to an actual undisclosed location was George Bush on the morning of 9/11. And the other thing is, once Trump was whisked off in his catering truck to his nondescript plane and flown out of Turkey, there were still several members of his staff and the entire travelling press corps who had no idea that they were on a plane that the US Secret Service thought there was a credible chance wasn't going to make it back home.
Were you aware of any credible threat by Iran against Air Force One?
I have a threat all the time. I'm number one on their list before you. But if I go, you go. Right?
And also, what I'm desperate to know is what Trump did pretty much on his own for 25 minutes in rural Suffolk. I guess we'll never know.